Well, hello everybody. Welcome to your Language Teaching and Learning channel. My name is Santiago, and as you can see, we're still taking a little break from the shop talk because many of you are probably still on vacation, taking break from school, and you will probably start classes in a couple of weeks. So this is why we're taking a little break from the shop talk, as I mentioned before. And in order to give people the opportunity to put into practice the things that we have been talking about. We'll continue talking about speaking and writing and maybe some interviews later on too. But now we're going to talk, as I mentioned in the last video, about a major technological breakthrough that affected music and of course all our lives in general. Okay, and so let me just start by asking you, what comes to your mind when I mention silicon? Okay, some of you probably think, okay, this is the material that I use in order to work, do some art work with my students. True. Some of you may think, okay, well, this is what I use for waterproofing the edges of the windows or the doors. Technically, that's called caulking. Okay, that's true too. Okay, and well, some of you may think, oh, Silicon Valley. Yes, and that you will see why it's called Silicon Valley. Yes, and it's also because silicon, it's a semiconductor. What does that mean in electrical or electronic terms? It's this was used as a concept. Originally, the concept was thought of in the 20s or 30s, but they didn't have the technology to develop it at the time. And what it was is, for example, in electricity, you have a resistor, which what it does is just resist electricity. But a diode, which is a semiconductor, okay, it allows electricity to flow one way, but not the other way, direct current, right? And this later on turned into a transistor. And this is a transistor right here, okay? And I'm sure you can see the three legs there. There's a diode in here, and what they found was that when you connect this and you put power through it, it actually amplifies the signal that you put in, comes out amplified. So this is the basic concept of an amplification system. Okay. Now this is a major breakthrough. Why? Because before that, you see, we had this, and just so you can, this is called a tube. Just so that you can have an idea, and if you talk about the history of computers, whatever, you may have been told that, okay, computers used to be, one computer was about the size of a gym, and it was very hard. Why? Because it worked with relays and transformers and tubes. And of course, with the invention of the transistor, you see your cell phone now has more power than that computer did. Okay, so you see the whole gym now fits into your cell phone. That's how powerful it is, okay, this invention. And just so that you can have another idea, the televisions before, if you have one lying around or if you can watch movies from before, you can see that the screen is big and they're very bulky, they're huge. It's because they worked with tubes. The screen itself actually, it was a tube. If you check out the monitors, the old monitors from computers, it's the same concept. They were a tube. That's why they're so big, you see, so bulky. So anyway, when they discovered the transistors, then you had a MOSFET transistor, which meant in this same space here, you had two transistors. And then in this same space, what happened later was that you can put 100 transistors there. And now you can probably put 1,000 transistors. Now, a transistor is, yes, an amplification system, or it works also as a switch. And if you know computer programming, you know that the language, computer language and everything else, all the computer does is answer yes or no. The switch is on or off. So, if this used to be one switch before, and now you can put 1,000 switches in here, this is why computers are getting faster and more powerful. Why? Because the technology is becoming smaller and smaller. You see, this is in a computer chip, you could probably have, I don't know, 1,000,000 transistors in that chip. Before, this was one transistor, so 1,000 of these take up a lot of space. But if you can put 1,000 here, that's the difference. Okay. Now, of course, there's some of us who argue, okay, this is as I said, a Fender Reverber from the 60s. It uses tubes. many of us argue that the sound that you get from this is a lot richer and better than the sound that you get from transistors and the new technologies. You can listen to the difference and you be your own judge, correct? Now, this helped. You see, when you have the transistor and then you have put two transistors in here, I think that was called a MOSFET transistor, and then somebody found that when you put a lot of the volume too high, it caused distortion. And that still happens. If you're listening to the radio and you put the volume too high, you know, there's a song you like, and then you hear, oh, it sounds horrible. It's a distortion, okay? Because you are overdriving the transistors. However, when you do that for sound, for example, for a guitar, and I'm sure you've heard of, for example, BTO, Bachman-Turner overdrive, the sound that they had in the guitar, they were overdriving the transistors, you see? And that, okay, this was, for example, an overdrive distortion, okay? The first one that I had for an overdrive was about this size. Then they became smaller, and they couldn't be smaller than that because, you know, you have to work them with your feet. But now something like this, you have 100 different sounds, and you can program them. That's how technology influenced music. And you see, for example, you have groups that have the signature sounds. For example, if you listen to Boston, okay, I think Mr. Schultz, I think he was an electronics engineer. He developed that distortion, that sound for the guitar. You see, and I think he patented it. That's why you cannot hear other groups playing with a similar sound. It's just Boston's, you see. Queen, for example. The moment you hear that sound on the guitar, you know it's Queen. Van Halen, okay? So these are signature sounds for the different groups that they just developed that sound, and you listen to the sound, you know who they are, right? Okay, now let's go back to the diode. Remember, we talked about the diode and then the transistor. They also developed something like this. Well, not this exactly. This is an LED. And I'm sure you probably know that rings the bell. LED, what's that? This is the original one. An LED. This is a light emitting diode. Now remember, what does a diode do? A diode conducts electricity one way, but not the other way, right? Well, you had another kind of diode. I think it was a Zener diode, in which it stopped electricity from flowing one way, but then up to a certain point, and then it actually let electricity through. In the case of the LEDs, okay, similar idea. It conducts electricity one way, but not the other way. And when it does conduct electricity, it does go on. Now, where did you hear this from? Where have you heard this? On televisions. You see, the new televisions are called LED TVs, LED, light emitting diode televisions. And you see, so what do they have? They have, depending on the number of pixels, maybe millions of it, I don't know. Okay, and that, you can see the difference. The big TVs, bulky and heavy. The new TVs, thin and very light. And the quality is amazing. That's how much that little technological breakthrough has influenced our lives in general, in everything that we do now. Television, technology, computers, cell phones, and everything else. And that's how it influenced music too, in the 70s, and continues to influence music. And we will talk about more about that when we continue talking about the different groups and everything else, music in the 70s and up until the mid-80s. Remember, we talked about how they influence in concerts and everything else. Same idea. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this informative video, and I look forward to you joining me in the next videos. Meanwhile, take good care of yourself, and see you later.